So as we often do, we'll close out the festival with some emphasis on questions in the last class. So please have your questions in mind about whatever you want to ask. And as we've done before, we begin our question session by chanting a verse from Bhagavatam that glorifies questions. As we often point out, everyone thinks that they need the answers. But the Bhagavatam teaches you that just as important as the right answers are the right questions. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, both the questions and the answers are glorified. And you'll see that in the dialogue between Shukadeva Goswami and Pritchett Maharaj, as well as other dialogues that are nested within the presentation by Shukadeva Goswami, like Maitreya and Vidura, so on and so forth, sages and Naimisaranya and Sutta Goswami. Everyone's always glorifying questions, and that teaches us that it's a transcendental art and science how to ask an appropriate question. So we're going to chant second canto, chapter 1, text 1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Shuka Vacha Pariyaneshate Prashna Krito Lokahitam Nirpa Atmavit Samata Pumsam Shrotavyadrishuya Paraha Pariyaneshate Prashna Krito Lokahitam Nirpa Atmavit Samata Pumsam Shrotavyadrishuya Paraha Bhariyaneshate Prashna Krito Lokahitam Nirpa Atmavit Samata Pumsam Shrotavyadrishuya Paraha. Samata Pumsam Atmavit Samata Pumsam So what's happening? Malfunctioning? Ladies, Vaishnavis, Oh well. Shri Shukavacha, Shri Shukadev Goswami said, Badiyan, glorious, Asha, this, Te, your, Prashna, question, Krita, made by you, Lokahitam, beneficial for all men, Nipa, O king, Atmavit, transcendentalist, Samata, approved, Pumsam, of all men, Shrotavya Adishu, in all kinds of hearing, Ya, what is, Pada, the supreme. Translation. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, my dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial to all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing, and it is approved by all transcendentalists. Repeat after me. My dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial to all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing. And it is approved by all transcendentalists. Purport. Even the very question is so nice that it is the best subject matter for hearing. Simply by such questioning and hearing, one can achieve the highest perfectional stage of life. Because Lord Krishna is the original Supreme Person, any question about him is original and perfect. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that the highest perfection of life is to achieve the transcendental loving service of Krishna. Because questions and answers about Krishna elevate one to that transcendental position. The questions of Maharaj Parikshit about Krishna philosophy are greatly glorified. Maharaj Parikshit wanted to absorb his mind completely in Krishna, and such absorption can be effected simply by hearing about the uncommon activities of Krishna. For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that simply by understanding the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna's appearance, disappearance, and activities, one can immediately return home back to Godhead and never come back to this miserable condition of material existence. It is very auspicious, therefore, to hear always about Krishna. So Maharaj Parikshit requested Shukadeva Goswami to narrate the activities of Krishna so that he could engage his mind in Krishna. The activities of Krishna are non-different from Krishna himself. As long as one is engaged in hearing such transcendental activities of Krishna, he remains aloof from the conditional life of material existence. The topics of Lord Krishna are so auspicious that they purify the speaker, the hearer, and the inquirer. They are compared to the Ganges waters which flow from the toe of Lord Krishna. Wherever the Ganges waters go, they purify the land and the person who bathes in them. Similarly, Krishna Katha, or topics of Krishna, are so pure that wherever they are spoken, the place, the hearer, the inquirer, the speaker, and all concerned become purified. Om Gana Tirmadandasya, Gana Jana Shalakaya, Chakshurun Militang Yena, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. As we were discussing, normally you don't consider questions to be the most vital. But we've explained how Srimad Bhagavatam elevates both the questions and the answers, because the questions themselves elevate, and not simply the answers. Shukadeva Goswami is pointing out to Parikshit Maharaj, in a scientific way, why your questions are so vital. First of all, the vital glory of your questions, Parikshit Maharaj, is number one, that those questions are beneficial to all kinds of people. Now, how many questions can you think of that would benefit every human being? But that is the nature of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's built upon questions that benefit everyone. And number two, the question leads to an answer that is the prime subject matter for hearing. And that means not only is the answer the prime subject matter for hearing, but also the question is. And number three, the question is approved by all transcendentalists, persons who know what they're talking about. Any person who actually has intelligence wants to deal with things that are authorized. Authorized means coming from experts. So people are like that about their material life. They want to consult experts. What is the best product? What is the best car? Why not consult experts in spiritual life? Find out what their reviews are. Find out what their recommendations are. So these three factors are very important as established by Shukadeva Goswami. He's definitely letting you know that the questions asked by Parikshit Maharaj are not material. They're not mundane. He wants you to be clear about that. What were Parikshit Maharaj's questions? He wanted to know, what is perfection and how do you achieve perfection? Particularly, what's the best thing to hear about, to chant and to remember, and what should you avoid hearing about, chanting and remembering? So this shows you that questions in spiritual life have two aspects. You ask questions about what can accelerate your spiritual development, and you ask questions about what can impede your spiritual development. So this is the nature of the science of questions and answers. The Acharyas point out that you should not just chant the answers, but you should also chant the questions. Hear, chant, and remember the questions. Because these questions are the best. These questions are the ultimate. There's nothing higher than these questions. And even if people just hear the questions and chant the questions and remember the questions, their life will be completely successful. That's just by hearing the questions, chanting the questions, remembering the questions. And what to speak of if you hear the answer and chant the answer and remember the answer. At the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes a verse from the first chapter of the 10th canto about how just as the water of the Ganges purifies the three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. Similarly, Krishna Katha talks about Krishna purify the person who's speaking, the person who's asking the questions, and the audience that's listening to the questions and answers. And then you can also add in the very place where the activity of questions and answers occurs. That very place becomes purified. So much so that wherever the glories of Krishna are being recited, and then the personalities partaking in that meeting go away. Still, afterwards, anyone traversing that place is affected by the purity. This is how powerful Krishna Katha is. It creates sacred spaces. And of course, the most concentrated sacred places are the dhams. They are embassies of the spiritual world, as you've heard, that have opened up in the material world to give shelter, to give spiritual clarity and rejuvenation. But at the same time, the Shastra says, if a devotee is powerful enough, wherever the devotee goes and is glorifying Krishna, that place turns into a sacred place of pilgrimage. This is discussed in the first canto of Bhagavatam. Tirti kurvanti tirtani. Wherever you go, that is a tirtha, a holy place of pilgrimage. The nature of material existence is that it's perplexing. This encountering of perplexing situations comes upon everyone, non-devotees, devotees, and therefore guidance is necessary. Just like Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, he's stuck in a very perplexing situation. Krishna has done that to him to use him as an example, to show us what to do when the inevitable perplexities of life, the baffling moments of life come upon us. Just to show us what to do, Krishna put Arjuna into Mahamaya, not Yogamaya, for our benefit. And Arjuna is such a surrendered soul, he was put into Mahamaya to demonstrate what material lamentation and material confusion is like and how to get out of it. So he wasn't faking. There's so many, it's not that Arjuna was thinking there's so many conditioned souls and I need to put on a drama so that they understand what it's like to be confused, perplexed, and how to come out of the confusion. No, Krishna arranged, because Krishna is the wielder of all his potencies. So he can arrange. Now Arjuna will be in illusion. And then everyone will be able to see what it's like and how to come out of it. Remember Arjuna's words? Oh, Krishna, I can see no way out of this situation. All the options are bleak. Whether I fight, whether I don't fight, I don't see how any good can come. He was stumped. He was between a rock and a hard place, as we say. From that standpoint, he was asking questions to Krishna. So we can see that if this can happen to Arjuna, although by divine arrangement, what to speak of us? Because it's the nature of material existence to throw up perplexity. The very essence of material nature in of itself is perplexing, sooner or later. And the intelligent person questions the happiness and the joy problem. Whatever happiness and joy you're looking for dissipates. And that makes you feel worse than if you never had it. And so after countless births and deaths of such repeated exasperation, the conditioned soul may wise up and start asking questions. Is this the way life is meant to be? You would be shocked to know how many persons, I've seen surveys done, of how many persons will say that their life is meaningless or doesn't have much meaning at all. You'd be shocked to know. It sounds strange to you because your life is full of Krishna meaning. But many persons in their honest moments will confess, even though they're busy doing so many things, working, raising family, this, that, the other, when pressed, they just say, I don't know what the point of all this is really. I'm just doing it. What is the meaning to all this? But because they're imprisoned by the illusory energy, they just repeat the same behavior because no one knows anything else. Yeah, it's meaningless, or who knows what the meaning is, but anyway, you got to push on. You resign yourself to such a life because, well, that's what everyone's doing and there's nothing else. Lacking transcendental information of the science of loving Krishna, what are your options? Like in London on the buses, someone took out adverts to put on the sides and the back of the buses in London. There's probably no God, so don't worry. Just get on with enjoying your life. No need to worry that there's some supreme controller, overseer, witness. Just get on with trying to make your own meaning. That's the meaning. You make your own meaning. But an intelligent person thinks, all right, I make my own meaning for this life, and then what? This is like telling some criminals, just make your own laws. Everything will come out fine. So we may take for granted how Krishna has surcharged our life with genuine meaning. You see, materialists will think that you're not brave enough to face the chaos and the emptiness of life, so you have concocted these meanings. Some materialists will criticize you for that. You're not brave enough to face the vast universe and its pointlessness. As if there's some kind of medal or some kind of award given for someone who decides the universe is just a random, chaotic event and there's no real meaning, and just face that. So what's your reward for facing that? It's like these persons who say that imagine there's some kind of certificate given to you. Oh, you understand. There's nothing. But you're supposed to be satisfied knowing there's nothing. Have any of you tried that? You can't be satisfied that way. You either have to commit suicide, which many of them do, bury yourself into work, become a workaholic, or become addicted to intoxication. So there are those who will criticize. You've just invented these spiritual meanings because you can't face the stark reality that the universe is just a random, chaotic, pointless event. You weren't brave enough. You had to invent a tooth fairy. How many of you, when you were little kids, were told by your parents when you lost a tooth to put it under your pillow, and then when you wake up in the morning, the tooth fairy would put some money there? How many of you did it? Yeah, everyone wanted the money. So that's what aggressive materialists say your spirituality is. You've just invented a tooth fairy. And your spirituality is designed for persons who are afraid of the dark. Because you're afraid of the dark, the reality, you invent, or you subject yourself to these spiritual notions. Of course, our response is that your materialism is for persons who are afraid of the light. You can't face the fact that there is illumination, there is vidya, transcendental knowledge. And like an owl, you want to keep your eyes shut and sleep even during the day. So you say that we're afraid of the dark, we say you're afraid of the light. We're never going to agree. There's always going to be a disagreement between the two. As Krishna says in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, what's day for one is night for the other, and vice versa. It's just the way it's going to be. Why? Dvabhuta sarga lokesmin daiva asura. Since the beginning of creation, there have always been two classes of persons, divine and demoniac. And then there's shades in between. Most persons these days, in the age of Kali, although they behave in a demoniac way, they're basically being misled. They don't have access to genuine knowledge, to genuine education. So by circumstance, they're in the demoniac category because they're accepting conceptions and situations which have been designed by those who are actually demoniac. So in that way, most people are innocent. They're just misled. And until you give them something better, they'll continue to be misled. I don't know if you've ever met someone or someones who will actually show you their demoniac intent, their demoniac strategy. I don't know if any of you ever met persons like that? Very rare. They generally stay behind the scenes. Sometimes you may encounter such a person and randomly, maybe on Sankirtan, or I've told you that example when I was with Munichari and Shrudichari, and I was transiting the Auckland airport, and something happened. The flight got delayed, and so I had to stay in a motel near the airport overnight to get an early morning flight. And we went to a motel, checked in. The guy gave us the key for the room. We went to the room, and we were talking there before Munichari and Shrudichari would leave. And all of a sudden, the motel clerk, I don't know whether he was the owner or just the clerk, showed up in the doorway to the room where I was in. And Munichari and Shrudichari were standing in the doorway, and his face was red, he was shaking. And he basically was saying, I don't know what it is, but I want you guys out of here. I mean, we weren't dressed. I was dressed in devotee attire. I don't think Munichari and Shrudichari were in. But the guy just sniffed and sensed something. There's something very dangerous here. I just want you out of here. He couldn't even be rational about it. You just got to go. It was shocking in liberal New Zealand, someone saying like that. He was shaking, his face was red, and so we just said, all right, hey, give us our money back, we'll go. He readily gave the money back, and we left. And he couldn't verbalize what he was so antagonized by. So occasionally you run into persons like that And sometimes they're in powerful positions in society, but they don't throw all their cards out on the table in public. But sometimes you have to deal with them because they have positions in government or positions in churches or some kind of prominent position in society, and they use that for how to get rid of Krishna Bhakti, just like Kamsa. But most persons are just misled. They just don't know. They're just going with the flow, like so many of us did, right? Sometimes I ask the devotees, why did you do this? Why did you do that in your previous days, in your karmic days? And many of them will just tell me, well, that was what everyone else was doing. In this way, innocent persons are being carried along by the waves of ignorance because everyone else is doing it. So questions and answers in Srimad Bhagavatam pierce the veil of such ignorance. And that's why Shukadeva Goswami is glorifying the questions. Parikshit Maharaj asked him, what's the best thing to hear, chant about, and remember? What you should not hear, chant, and remember? What is perfection, and what is the means for attaining perfection? Those questions by Parikshit Maharaj are what instigates Srimad Bhagavatam, the answers by Shukadeva Goswami. So as you heard, Shukadeva Goswami is so much appreciating the questions. And as we've heard, just the questions alone are enough to benefit someone. And then add on top of that the answers. And you have something that's inconceivably extraordinary, and that is Srimad Bhagavatam.